Hey, how's it, everybody? Daren Kimura here from the Sports Cards and Collectibles radio show on ESPN Honolulu. Wanted to give you guys a little feedback here on some kind of cool things that are happening in the sports cards world. You know, a lot of people have been asking, "Hey, how can I jump in? How is it possible for me to turn this into kind of an investment? Maybe something long term I can give to my kids, something that's a little more than just a hobby." There's other hobbyists that are coming to me asking me the same thing, and there's actually longtime collectors who are collecting for in the 90s and 80s that are coming back to the industry saying, "Hey, how can I get back into this? I don't understand what's going on anymore. It's so different." And they're right. It is very different. So what I wanted to do today is sort of give you a sports cards 101, a little introduction to kind of how things are today and give you an idea of what to look for when it comes time to, jump back into the collection, get yourself going into maybe the investment side, kind of give you a little rundown on certain things that you got to look for and different opportunities that are out there as you're diving into this collectibles world. First of all, packs are different. What in the world how can packs be different? Well, simple. In the olden days, it was basically just go to the local corner store, maybe pick up a couple of packs at the convenience store. If you were lucky enough to have a local card store you could go to, great. Go in, pick up a couple of packs, maybe a couple of boxes. Things are very different now with the advent of the internet, with the large big box stores, Target, Walmart, those kinds of things. The market's really changed. In addition to your basic hobby products, there are a lot of retail products out there too. And I'll tell you what's really interesting. The retail market has kind of revolutionized the reach for the collectibles and sports cards and Pokemon and all of that. In other words, now, instead of having to rush to a 20-mile away local card store, or if you're lucky enough to have a corner store that had maybe one or two products, you can walk into a big box store or jump on Amazon and find these very products right there, very easy to get. Now, with that, the million-dollar question is it worth it? There's always something interesting in every retail product. And one of the things I want to let you know is that every single retail product, and we've got a couple of different retail products here, every single retail product has a little different chase. What do I mean by that? Well, for example, these cello packs have a different chase card than the hangers or the blasters. And they also have a different chase than something like those hobby cards or those hobby boxes that we see. So there's always different opportunities depending on what product you can afford, what product you're looking for, and what players you're looking for. Now, after you open up these packs, you got to figure out what to do with them. Now, if you're pulling rookie cards and you got these nice little top loaders, and by the way, that's another thing that's big these days is trying to find top loaders in plastics. If you have them in top loaders, that's great for building a personal collection. Now, if you're looking for long-term investment, however, putting them in these top loaders is a great way to hold them while you're trying to figure out what to do next. But the reality is, this is kind of only step one. See, when you get to the point where you're dealing with much bigger, much more expensive cards, you start looking at things like magnetic one-touches. And this particular product, they actually sell the card in the magnetic one-touch. So we're talking about Fernando Tatis. This one happens to be numbered to 10. And this particular card is actually sold in the product, in a mag, in a box. So you don't even have to worry about trying to find the magnetic one-touch. It's actually already there. Now, let's just say you have some really high-end stuff, whether they're in these magnetic one-touches or they're in these top loaders, and you're trying to figure out, what should I do with them now? I've held on for a little bit. I kind of have an idea what things I want to put some money into. What do I do next? Well, the next thing is you have to look at getting cards graded. And I'll be honest with you, in this day and age, grading is by far the single most unique step that's happened in the collectibles world. It's sort of catapulted the collectibles from simply holding a piece of cardboard to now turning it into a legitimate investment product. Now, why? Pretty simple. When you were online or when you were looking at your friends' cards, you didn't really know what the condition was. You could take a close look at it. You have a pretty good idea. Is this a pretty well-centered card? How are the corners? Are they really nice? Is the color clean? Are the edges really clean? Are there any folds or bends in the card? You had a pretty good idea, but you didn't necessarily know if the guy that you were buying it from on the other side of the internet, the other side of the Atlantic Ocean or the other side of the Pacific Ocean, if they had the same opinions as you. With the advent of grading, it allowed people to actually share value without having to know too much about the actual condition of the card, because the grade itself told you the condition. You didn't have to look to see if all four corners were perfect. You didn't have to look to see if it was perfectly centered. If it had a grade 10, you had a pretty good idea it was a really clean card. had a grade 4 or 5, you had a pretty good idea it wasn't a very good condition card. But the nice thing about grading is it's an independent third party that's giving you their honest opinion. Now, here's where it got interesting. In the last few years, a number of grading companies have come around, and one of them that I do want to introduce to some of you who have maybe never seen this grading company before is GMA. Now, GMA is one of these companies that has kind of been around now for a few years. They are an upstart company. I will say this. What I've seen so far from GMA's products is that in general, on their lower end cards, the grades are fine. In fact, I would actually tell you that a GMA graded card, especially a graded 9 of a lower end card, is probably the exact same grade as a PSA or BGS graded card. Now, those are two of the more reputable companies. Those are two of the longer term companies as well. So those of you looking to increase your personal collection, GMA graded cards are an inexpensive opportunity because the market hasn't given GMA a premium. Now, those of you looking for an investment value, GMA might not be the way to go. GMA is one of those, like I said, if you're just looking to get a decently graded card and put something into your personal collection, GMA is an inexpensive way to go. Now, another company that's been around a long time is a company called SGC. Now, SGC made their money over the last few years mostly on grading older cards. In fact, for the longest time, they were the only ones that graded vintage cards. Because SGC was only grading a lot of vintage cards, they became known as sort of the vintage grader. In fact, until Beckett Vintage Grading came about and Beckett themselves started to do vintage and PSA started to gain a better reputation for doing vintage, SGC was it. That was the only one available to do vintage. Now, recently they started picking up more modern stuff. I'll be honest with you, my opinion, SGC is not the way to go if you're looking to actually enhance value long term. Now, if you're looking at vintage stuff, especially some of the older graded SGC stuff, you're in fine. You're in good shape. You have no problem, nothing to worry about. But if you're looking at modern stuff, my recommendation is stick to the big two. That's PSA and BGS. Now, after you get your cards graded with PSA, you're talking about putting them into these slabs. Now, one of the nice things about PSA is they've gone out of their way to enhance a lot of their safety features on their cards. For one thing, one of the things that you'll notice out there on a lot of the fraudulent PSA cards is you'll see little rivets that appear to hold the slabs together. Those little rivets do not exist on PSA legitimate graded cards. Further, the PSA slabs themselves have this holographic little logo now in the middle, and these holographic logos, almost impossible to fake. What they've also done is they've gone out of their way to make sure that anytime someone comes across a graded card that's PSA graded and it's a fraudulent card, they actually invalidate the certificate on their website. And you can use the PSA app, scan the barcodes here, and it'll pull up exactly what the population report is like, or it'll tell you if that certificate number has been invalidated because too many people are using it as a fraudulent certificate number. Now, the other company I mentioned, of course, was BGS. And one of the things I like about BGS is BGS has created this sort of this subworld of 9.5 being sort of a gem mint versus, say, the PSA 9. There's no PSA 9.5. There's a PSA 9.5, then a PSA 10. What's happened over the last few years as collectors have gotten more used to these trends, though, is you'll find that the BGS 9.5, while good, is still not exactly the creme de la creme. What's happened is PSA 10s have kind of caught them. So in most opportunities you have to buy and invest, you do want to invest in a PSA 10, especially a PSA 10 with a PSA 10 also auto grade. Now this one happens to have a BGS 10 auto grade with a PSA 9.5 gem mint grade. Now if you look closely, there are different subgrades and everything on here, and that's something else that definitely matters with BGS. When you're buying BGS, you want to make sure that every single one of these 9.5s are either 9.5 subgrades or 10 subgrades. That, of course, enhances the value of your card as well. Now, if you're looking to convert a BGS 9.5 to a PSA 10, just keep in mind that in general, a lot of them don't cross over anymore. Plus, PSA stopped doing crossovers. Something to think about. Now, if BGS has a 9.5, does BGS have a 10? Absolutely. BGS does have a 10. Now, the way to get the BGS 10 is pretty simple. You just need 3 out of the 4 subgrades to be a 10, and you end up with a BGS 10. Is a BGS 10 worth the same as a PSA 10? Actually, no. BGS 10s do get a premium over PSA 10s, and there's even one level higher than this with 410 subgrades where it's a BGS, what they call black label. Now, one of the things I wanted to do is give you an idea between, say, a 9.5 and a 10, what you can actually look for. Now, there's very simple things. The difference between a 9.5 and a 10, in the subgrades, all you have to do is take a look and you'll see where some areas of weakness are in each card. And in doing that, you have an opportunity potentially to see if there's maybe something that you can do to help the card. And what I mean by that is, if you're looking at a card that has a 9.5 all the way around, and you have, and when you look at it, that 9.5 looks like maybe it's a little off on the centering, and it's really obvious that it's really off on the centering. It's probably not going to cross over to a PSA 10. If you see a bunch of 9.5s and a bunch of 10s, and you still have a 9.5 BGS grade, and the centering is really nice, the edges are nice, and everything looks really nice, there's a possibility you can enhance the value of the card by buying a BGS 9.5 and crossing it over to a PSA 10. Now, if you have a BGS 10, you're nuts if you do that. In other words, leave it as a BGS 10. And I'll tell you what's happened in the market too is we've seen sort of this graduated value from the BGS 9.5 to be, sort of a really nice card to have. That's kind of where all the investors start. To the next thing up is after that, you want the PSA 10, and after that, the BGS 10. With the BGS PSA comparison, a lot of people ask me, well, does that mean that PSA 10s are really not as good? I mean, is that something I should not be buying? Well, no. Again, there is sort of this graduated tier. So if what you can afford is a BGS 9.5, absolutely nothing wrong with that. By the way, really good investment right now, especially since he's hurt. There's a lot of people looking to sell a bunch of BGS 9.5s for good prices. I strongly recommend you take a look at picking some of these up because their prices are actually really quite affordable right now. Now, if you can afford the 9.5 and that's all you can afford, and it's a great investment, absolutely go ahead and do this. But here's a sort of a little nugget. 9.5s are not going to sell for as much as PSA 10s. And PSA 10s of Mike Trout are still actually really good prices right now. Now, here's where it gets a little challenging, as it always happens in the collector's market. Even if the PSA 10s are a little bit down and they're good prices right now, the really high-end stuff like the BGS 10s or the BGS black labels, they're still really high. They're still really good prices. Why? Because people realize the population is very small on them, and they're very difficult to get. So as far as investment value, if you have the BGS 10, absolutely hang on to it. My nickel's worth of free advice, a little golden nugget here is if you have some money and you can put some money aside and pick up a couple of these Trout BGS 9.5s or the PSA 10s, by all means go ahead and do that. If you can put some money aside and pick up the BGS 10 for your personal collection, by all means go ahead and do that as well. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and show you guys what it's like to open packs. So why don't we go ahead and bring somebody in to help me?